What is up, guys, and welcome back to another installment over here on YouTube. Today we're going to jump into an interesting piece of footage where we look into the currently best no-limit hold'em cash game player in the world, Owen Messere, also known as Prodigy, battling it out in 4-card PLO against some regulars and probably some recreational players at the Hippodrome. We're playing 25-50. I'd say let's jump into the action.
Now he puts him to
This is supposed to be top 5 hands from this stream, featuring also obviously Owen Messere, also known as Prodigy, which is on the screen right here. So this guy is going to be Owen. Let's see how this is going to unfold. First hand here, we're going to jump right in.
The 20 big blind stack, so you could only buy in with like I think 40 big blinds.
So this is a single race pot, I suppose, 4 players, not unusual for live games. I'm not going to go too much into the strategy of pre-flop, but you will see loose hands collide. The main difference between online and live is you're going to see more multi-way pots, and conversely to what a lot of live players do, which is to play more hands, you actually have to play less hands, and that is because you have to beat more players post-flop, so the degree of nuttiness that you need is going to be higher when you play live poker. It is easy to play too many hands because you see all your opponents playing so many hands, so sort of the herd mentality thinks, well, if they are able to play all these hands supposedly profitable, I mean, I'm obviously going to be able to play as many hands as well, right? And that is exactly the wrong way to think about it. You want to play more hands for various reasons. Sure, there is an edge that you sometimes have, especially in live games. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of your edge in multi-way pots in these passive games comes actually from pre-flop decisions. Because once you go to the flop, it's not like you can just bluff your opponents of every hand. Your hand is very often quote-unquote playing itself. Conversely to when you play online or when you play in a tighter game live, when you go to the flop heads up, there's a lot more fin value betting, there's a lot more bluffing, there's a lot more edge to be gained in heads up situations post flop, which is also one of the reasons when you play deep live, you want to 3-bet and isolate against weaker opponents because you're able to play more heads up pots where your edge is going to be larger than in multi-way single race pots. Again, multi-way single race pots, a huge part of your edge is making the right pre-flop decisions, which usually boils down to playing a bit tighter and waiting for hands that do well multi-way. So anyway, we're heading to a floppy single race pot. The big blind defended, I guess the small blind with Jack, 8-6 rainbow. I'm not sure if this is I don't think it's a straddled pot, so I suppose we saw a raise. Anyway, this guy flops the nuts, and when you look into heads-up situations, even 3-ways, obviously when you're out of position, you don't want to bet very often, but I think in a 4-way spot in a live environment, you do want to lead out. Even in this case, he does have the nuts and no redraw. However, the benefit of just getting his opponents out of the pot is just so large that I think it outweighs the downsides of building a pot with a hand that has not so much backup. So I think leading out here large and making some mediocre flush draws and gut shots fold with backdoor flush draw potential is a really big gain. In this particular case, you can see that the small blind has actually 83% equity, which is very unusual even on a texture like this. And so this hand doesn't benefit as much from protection, but I still like leading out here for a large sizing, something like 300. You don't necessarily have to standardize your sizing choice in a soft game, in a live game. You can just choose the sizing you think is going to work best for what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, always within the context of not giving away too much, which oftentimes depends on the players in the hand. So this guy bets $175 into 3 opponents. And the big blind has a decision. So didn't decide to squeeze, which is probably where I would play different pre. Even though the hand is rainbow, you want to squeeze pre. It's going to play much smoother post-flop, and you might get players to fold. If the hand would be a little bit weaker, so less connectivity, I don't mind flatting. Anyway, on the flop, this is an absolutely mandatory fold. Now, you might think, well, he has aces, right? Well, this is not hold'em. And he also has a gutter. Again, this is not hold'em because your gutter is basically worthless against a straight. So this guy in the big blind is about to call because I already saw the first hand. It is a common mistake. Here's the way to reframe or rewire your brain. Aces is great pre and in 4-card PLO, and you're fine getting it in most scenarios. But post-flop, just think of your hand strength more as like, I have one pair in this instance and a gutter that is not to the nuts, right? So you have one pair, in a gutter that is not to the nuts, and you're playing a 4-way pot. So your opponent is never bluffing, it's always value betting. And in this instance, yes, he has the ace of spades, and he thinks, well, if I call here, I can make a straight, which again isn't that great. I can make, maybe I have the best hand, which is never the case. But the big reason I think this player is calling is because he has the ace of spades, and the idea is to bluff on a spade run out. And the reality is you still have 2 players behind it that can raise the flop, and also your equity on the flop is just too low. Just because you have a chance to bluff on some run-outs, maybe your opponent isn't even folding, doesn't mean you want to float here in a multi-way pot. Heads up on the flop, it would be completely different. So now this is sort of where disaster strikes. So the guy in position turns top set. And this is actually kind of a tricky spot because now he's beating all the other sets. There's only one straight possible. When you play PLO, you want to think a lot about board texture. So in this case, 6-8 is the only straight. There are other board configurations where you have 3 straights possible, right? So if you have 3 cards that are connecting, so for example, 5, 6, 7, now you have 8, 9, then you have 8, 4, and you have 4, 3. Right, so combinatorically, you have a lot more straights available. In this case, he's going to be ahead by a lot, obviously, against sets. I don't think in a live game, a player like the small blind here, just stereotypically, I don't think it's going to have a draw, some sort of combo draw. Probably would have checked. So you're behind the straight and ahead of the sets. I would say I would probably lean more towards caution and not put it in because you still have an SPR of 3. So SPR of 3, like the way I would think about this is to say, well, we need around 43% equity to have a profitable jam. But obviously, in order to favor raising over calling, you want to have an equity advantage over your opponents. And I think combinatorically, your opponent's going to have a straight a lot more often than a set in this instance. You also block one set, I guess, holding an 8. You can also say you block a straight. But against a 500-pound bet here, I would just be calling. Not only because you're probably not going to be an equity favorite, but also you're giving a positional advantage by raising now and ending the hand by that. So you don't have a position anymore because the money is already in. And you cannot utilize the ace of spades anymore. What if the river is a 6 of spades? Now, in this instance, you would actually make a chop fold, for example. In some cases, you could make a flush fold. Depends on the opponent and how much to read into your hand and so on. But basically, the entire leverage you're able to develop with the ace of spades and certain runouts is now gone by that point. So you really have to assume that you have the best hand a lot to justify jamming here in position versus just taking the call and playing the river in position. And then lastly, I would say the small blind, if you want to bet large, just pot. There's no, like you're costing yourself money by not going pot on the turn here. With your value hand. In this instance, it won't matter because this guy is about to rip.
Interesting one. Okay.
But think of sizing choices more so in sort of brackets. You can bet small, medium, or pot. And if you want to bet big, so pot, just bet pot. And if you want to think, if you think your hand is more suitable for a medium sizing, go half pot. But there's no point in betting like 80% of the pot, for example. Nothing is going to be accomplished aside from just making less money from draws. So anyway, the money goes in here. We're looking at the first pot here, the top 5 hands. Obviously, in live games, there's always a lot to learn because you have people that might not be as technically advanced as an online player. So we're looking here at 36% equity. That is primarily because of the split outs, right? So this guy still has a straight draw. But if you have a set and you need to boat up, you usually have around 22% equity. So that's a pretty bad scenario.
So we have the hand.
We have a mate straight with
8. It's not going to do it.
okay.
Imagine the 8 if you had aces with the spade. Pretty interesting hand to bluff there as well.
Yeah.
And the 3.
They are, yeah, running it twice.
And
both
he's going to get
sides.
stacked
You would-
or doubles the small blind
in
up.
comes, no.
Let's move to the second hand. So from this point on, I haven't watched the
Okay,
hands.
we got another nice hand here for F.
We have the big blind raising it up. So I suppose there is a straddle. Not sure if this is true. Is it 25, 25, 50? He makes it 175.
He raises
Then
it
we
up
have
from
the
small
under the gun
blind, so
player
this-
here, 10,
yeah,
6,
the
5 deuce. I
straddle is on.
suppose this is a straddle or something. So it looks like a 3 blind
And this
game.
one is
They go heads up to a flop. And the flop, again, in this instance, offers 2 straights and a bunch of relevant straight redraws. So think about 8-7-5. So 10-9 jack is a commonly played 3-card combo in PLO. So it's going to be relevant. And then 6-9, pretty uncommon, 6-4 possible. But just realize that, let's say you have 6-4 in this instance, there are many, many ways where you're completely crushed. And the one would be your opponent has the 6-9 and you're maybe dead. But also there are many possibilities where your opponent can have a wrap and a flush draw, 2-pair open-ender, a bunch of stuff that does really well against a 6-4. So just keep that in mind. So in this instance, let's see, we have the Queen Jack 10-9 from the big blind. You can almost say it's a small blind because he raised into the straddle. And then the big blind with the wide range here defending, flopping, what is this, a 5 and a gutter, right? So they're actually flipping, given that the queen high hand has no pair yet. And if you're in the big blind's shoes here, I think you just want to check, because similar to no limit hold'em, like this board doesn't favor the preflop raiser, right? He raised from the big blind into the straddle. He's going to have a lot more high card heavy hands, and 8-7-5 doesn't do that well with that range. So you can check range. You can also bet your hand. It's not like this individual hand will be minus EV to bet. You can make profit betting. But as an overall strategy, you want to play most hands passive. And the hands you want to play the most aggressive are the hands that lose the most amount by not building the pot. So say, for example, you have the nut flush draw and a nutted straight draw. Maybe a hand like ace, 10-9 with nut spades. Right? For that hand, it's a real disaster if it goes check on the flop because you have so much equity. So you might want to just bet yourself. Special hands, like let's say you have a set of 7s and a flush draw, or a hand like a hand that maybe needs a bit of protection could also be a possibility. Maybe a hand like 8-7 jack 10 with backdoor hearts or a spade blocker. So there are some hands you want to bet. Primarily, I would think about hands that have too much to lose by not getting a bet in on the flop, or hands that you want to bluff and that cannot play check call. So in this instance, it would be, for example, the nut flush draw blocker and a straight draw blocker, right? You might have a hand like ace with the ace of spades, 7-9. So that hand doesn't play that well. Check call is a possibility, but like it's also a pretty nice hand to just start betting and applying pressure. But let's see what happens. Very often what people do in this instance, it seems to be true as well, is they look at their hand and they think, do I have something? And then they bet. And the problem with this thought is that if this player in the big blind here is just looking at the board and thinking, do I have something I'm going to bet? How is that going to affect the checking range, right? So when this player checks, it's probably going to check fold a huge amount at the time. And that's going to be a way to exploit this kind of behavior or strategy.
And kind of Husney, actually.
Okay, so what about Husney? So this is bad news because your opponent is betting into you at a position on a board that isn't that great for their range. So I don't think the big blind just picks up ace, king, queen and just fires the flop, maybe with the nut flush draw. But basically, the big blind, is saying that I have something, and if he does have something, then holding bottom pair and a weak gutter, no flush draw, no backdoor flush draw, is just a very garbagey hand. So this is a hand you just want to fold, even though in this particular instance, he has 51% equity. This is going to be a very, very optimistic call, given what's going on here, or what I think is going on with the betting ranges. So turn is a 9 of hearts, so now double flush board, and the jack 10 makes the straight. So big blind now with the check mark, and the small blind, the straddle, I keep confusing these, has the second nut straight, no redraw.
Yeah. Now we have it.
So once again, you want to ask yourself how many straights are possible. In this case, it's kind of infinite straights, and where are you standing right now? So 10-6 second nut straight, but no redraw. So the times he runs into jack 10, he's going to be completely dead. And that is a big problem. So sneaky check here by the big blind. I don't mind it too much. So when should you check with the nuts? I would say without going too much into the theory of it, I would say a good pattern to recognize is that when your hand plays particularly bad on the river because the board changes the nuts very often, you might consider check raising all in because it removes the positional disadvantage. Look, in this case, you have 2 flush draws on the board, right? And he has queen jack, Jack 10. I mean, he also has Queen Jack, but he has Jack 10, but he has no flush redraw. So betting the turn means that on the river, it will be difficult to know what to do because so many times the flush comes in or the board pairs, and he's going to be out of position. So because he has a vulnerable nut hand, it actually makes sense to check raise the turn all in. It would be different if he only had a pot size bet left. In that case, I would just advocate for jamming.
Then boy got the nut straight.
And then what is Husni doing? I think in general, you want to bet, but you don't want to commit yourself too much because when you get check jammed, you are in deep trouble. And you only want to bet against players that are kind of passive. If you play against a very strong thinking player, the default would certainly be to check back this hand.
And I think it's probably the same thing.
Because your overall equity is not that great. It's not as great as you might think because you have no flush redraw and you don't have the nuts. I assume what we're going to see is a way too large of a bet, which is pretty typical, but I haven't seen the hands. Let's see. If I were to bet, I would probably bet something like half pot. Here's the snap jam, and that is very bad news for 10-6, no redraw. He bet 750 into 910. Yeah, it's a very large bet.
But yeah, not a nice capitalize.
Because then he's kind of want a flush draw to call.
He knows it's kind of bad news, so he's not too happy. And it's the right thought, Like in this instance, if he puts his opponent on Jack 10, sometimes at least he has to, he's dead. And then what else could he have? I mean, maybe the same straight with the redraw, but honestly, this is usually Jack 10.
About the price, right? So
he goes out and calls, and this is going to be GG. He's going to win. Let's move over to the next hand. So in this hand, we have a raise to 200. PLO Pinky with the raise and the cutoff. PLO Professional. Then we have the button. Eunice, another PLO Professional, is going to call. So far, so good. Pretty standard. Could consider limping in PLO Pinky spots, but it's kind of boring for a live game that is televised, so I like the raise.
Yeah,
Husni has King 10-7, and it looks like they're still playing 25-50. So he's sitting here on something like 75-ish big blinds or so. And I think squeezing is actually reasonable, considering how wide the live ranges are and the fact that he's out of position. You really don't like to see the 3 clubs in your hand.
It's just finished.
Yeah.
It's tricky. If he had King 10-9, even King 10-8, it's a relatively easy decision. King 10-7, it's a bit tricky. I can see both ways there.
Next week.
Right.
Okay, we get Bobby folding, and so an easy call here for Pinky because his hand performs well against high card heavy ranges. And then Eunice in position is closing the action, so he's going to be in a great spot because even though his hand doesn't perform that well against aces, he gets to see what the other 2 players do first. And usually what happens is that Husni is going to jam the flop, and then Pinky is sandwiched with a much deeper stack size with Eunice. And that is amazing if you're Eunice, because sometimes you're going to flop really big, and Pinky has to sort of lightly commits on the flop, and that's amazing, so you can trap in position. But also what will happen very often is that Pinky has a profitable stack off against Husni post-flop, but cannot call because there's a deeper stack player behind him. So basically, Pinky gets to under-realize its equity, and then Eunice gets to benefit from that because he's in position. So stand-up call.
Sun on your face, eat good food, walk along the beach, play some poker. It's a real, complete mix. Almost perfection. I'm a big fan of poker in...
Let's increase the table sounds.
Big fan of poker in Malta, and EPT starts.
Okay, so super dry board. Pinky with the uber nuts. He flops 4-7, 8-7. So 7-4 is the nuts, and then 8-7 is the open ender. Doesn't have a backdoor flush draw, but he has obviously a super monster hand. Husni has kings, SBR1. If you play against one opponent on the flop, you can just rip this hand all in, no problem. If your opponent has you beat, that's unlucky. Now, as you're playing against 2 opponents, things change. He does have a 7. It's a fine blocker against 1 player. I think against 2, I think it's just going to be too light, honestly.
Just next week. And if
just want to go ahead and check. I imagine he's going to rip all in. Maybe that's also another thing to consider. If you're not super comfortable playing shallow SBRs, maybe just flat the King 10-7 pre. But let's see what happens here post-flop. I assume he's going to rip and Pinky is going to just call.
Or even the weekend grind. On PokerStars, it's W Coops last weekend.
It's a tricky spot. Like against one opponent, it's such a clear jam, and against two opponents, it just isn't. But you might not be, as familiar with the spot. It's actually a very common bread and butter spot for live games. He goes ahead and checks. I like it. I think Pinky here has a good hand to check. There are two things to consider. By the way, we haven't seen a hand here by Owen so far, so props for you guys making it in the video. Hopefully we're going to see some nice hands here from the No Limit Master. So, how do you think about this hand of Pinky? So, a few patterns to think about. One of them is if you care about GTO, because you might think that the player in position is going to be very aggressive when you check, you want to think about what is the dominant action. The dominant action basically means what most of your range wants to do, and then your hand probably fits that profile, right? So in this case, because he is sandwiched, the cutoff player wants to check primarily. It's the dominant action, most of his range. So checking here is never a mistake, in theory, regardless of what hand you have exactly. And then if you care about exploitation, I would think a lot about how likely is Younes to stab. And I would say the answer depends on what sizing choices he's capable of playing. If Younes is studied enough, he might choose something like a quarter pot size bet on the flop. And that is going to increase his frequency by a ton because he can choose a wide range of different hands to do this with because it's very cheap bluff. But if your opponent is not as studied and they might just pot or something like that or check, then that means they're going to check a ton at a time. So that's where understanding your opponents and their skill sets is very important and comes into play. I would say in general, people are probably understabbing because they don't know how to play small bets. They usually just pot, and that's not good news if you hold 8-7-4, 8-7-6-4. So in this instance, I might go ahead and bet myself, and I would never bet large here, but basically my goal would be to make aces continue, right, exploitatively, and maybe make also the button continue. So I might bet something like 650 or something in that region. Quarter pot, you can also go third pot or something in Pinky's shoes. And then maybe lastly, you can say, well, what's the pattern? Like what could we look out for in our hand that leans towards checking or betting? So when the SPR is low like this, you kind of want to fast play the hands that are vulnerable because you have great equity getting it in as your opponents are forced to get the money in lighter given the low SPR. And the hands that have a bit more playability, you could consider checking because they benefit more from giving away a free card and introducing the option to stack off light, apply pressure, bluff. So in this case, looking at the 8-7, it's an interesting candidate to find the check because you also have the nutted straight redraw. No BDFD, but I think it's if you had a hand like Jack 7-4 as an example, like I don't think checking here is really good. You just want to bet and get the money in and stack some other hand. But this is a pattern, with the open ender you can put into your checking range. So as you can see, if you kind of understand the game, there are a lot of things to consider on the side of GTO and on the side of exploitation. In Pinky's shoes, I would look at this hand and if I only had 10, 20 seconds to consider my options, I'm going to go ahead and bet 650 for all the reasons I mentioned. Don't care as much about the pattern, care more about the players and how passive they probably are versus check.
We can get him to move over whenever.
But let's see.
But I think he's here for the duration.
So what is this? 800 pounds, which is going to be third. 900 pounds, like a third. It's fine. Younes has a very easy fold. Basically, Pinky is kind of saying, I'm okay stacking off against the squeezer. And King, Queen, 7 is just, dead hand here. He has one pair, no draw. And now Husni has to really think about one thing primarily. Well, number one, what is the equity required to stack off? He has an SPR of 1, so he needs 33% equity to make a profitable jam or make a jam better than a fold. So does he have 33% equity? Obviously not in this instance, he has 7%. But he has to think about how wide is Pinky betting? Do I have 33% against that? I would say if Pinky would have been on the button, then things look a bit different because, again, the button has a much wider stabbing range in theory, facing two checks. As it happens now, it is tricky. 33% is not that much in PLO against a single player. He does block 4-7. If he runs into a pair in a straight draw, like he's doing okay, he's going to be a dog, but he can be a dog, right? So I'd say wouldn't blame him to stick it in here. Because the board is so low, it's hard to have a bunch of straights. I mean, think about 4 deuce. 4 deuce, very unlikely to be in the range. He's crushed by a set, which is not that easy to have combinatorically. I mean, a bunch of hands, like king, queen, 5-5 doesn't open usually. Or I don't know, jack 7, 6 doesn't open, right? So holding a set is a little bit unlikely. Like probably his opponent has some sort of 5-8-7 combo or something along those lines, and it's going to be okay jamming. So I think knowing your heads up at that point and looking how low the board actually is, it's an okay jam. Even though in this instance he's going to run into the absolute mega nuts. Let's see what happens. He is going to fold. It's going to be a close EV decision either way. So now we're going to move on to Prodigy. So we have a raise to 150 on the button. Call by Aki in the big blind with King Jack 10-3. And then Prodigy defends the straddle with the Jack 10-10 deuce. Okay, so decisions here, button standard, straddle standard, and the big blind collier's too wide by a lot. 2 players flop the nuts.
I just enjoy watching his.
Okay, so Aki, this guy I assume has flopped the nuts on this ace king queen board. Actually, is a plausible board to donk out because he's not in the big blind. I mean, he is in the big blind, but he's not in the last blind. So his range is supposed to be a bit more, well structured around high cards for the most part. He can definitely have a good amount of Jack 10. So leading is interesting, especially because he plays against the button. This is not a board where if you have the nuts, you're like, hey, let's check to the button. They're going to bet all the time. No, this is not an under the gun raiser. Like this, the button will have 9 high. I mean, in this case, he has a pair of 9s, but he's going to have 9 high, 8 high, just a queen, just a king. A bunch of those hands quite often. So you're not automatically collecting a bet from the button by checking this hand. And that's why, specifically against the button, you kind of want to lead out on these boards sometimes. Does the hand make a good fit? I mean, we don't have to go into the depths of that, but like what I'm saying is like leading here is good. But then in Prodigy's shoes, like leading is not a theoretically correct play because Prodigy has the weakest range by far on this board, given that he had the best price to call pre and close the action. So who's in betting 200? This is like way too light. You need something to work with, right? If he has a 10 or a jack in his hand and something else working with it, we can talk about it. If he has a hand like King Jack Jack, or if he has a hand like Ace 10 something, you could consider bluffing, but not with this airball. Like this is just too weak. He goes for 200. There's a call, and now Prodigy has a decision to. Actually, he's going to get raised to 600. Okay, so that's interesting. So what happens here is button bets 200. Big blind raises 600. Now up to Prodigy. Prodigy has an interesting hand because he has 2 10s, and you might think, well, no one has the straight, right? But this is not really how it works because even though you have removals, the raising range is so much centered around Jack 10. Like Aki is not raising King King here or Queen Queen, and he probably doesn't have Ace Ace pre-flop. So what really is happening is that very likely Aki does have Jack 10. So what do you make of this in Prodigy's shoes? Well, there isn't really much benefit in raising now because getting it in against Jack 10 doesn't do you that well. You have no backdoor flush draw, you have no 2 pair or something, so you're actually going to be behind, right? In this case, his opponent has a backdoor flush draw and has a pair already, so there's something going on. You could argue, well, let's get it in and get the button out, but the button is going to have like enough weak hands that you're actually benefiting from keeping in even Ace King or something along those lines. I would say the most attractive play for Prodigy is to call. And you do that because you know, quote unquote, that the big blind has Jack 10 and you're hoping to get rid of that hand along, the turn in the river. So by calling, you could still have kings. You could still have queens. You might have Ace King Queen 10 rainbow or something. You're basically not making your range very transparent, and you're hoping to bluff your opponent off a chop on a pairing run out.
So multifaceted.
That would be what I would
You know,
describe
he
as
can
the
play
standard
against
plan
players
here
that
for
might generally
Prodigy's
enjoy his
spot. But
bluffs
let's see how he
during
approaches this. I assume he's assuming the Jack 10 is much stronger.
I learned something
He calls,
from
which
him,
would
from his
I'm not sure if
statements.
this is a call.
Poker statements, not
Yeah, he
policy
nails it. So that's great.
statements.
Call and then button folds. Okay.
Yeah. So when he's one of the original
Let's see what
ones
the
that
turn
kind of
is.
Probably was part of get me into
Okay,
it,
so
and
turn
that's
is a
because I'm big
9 of
fan,
hearts.
only because I've met him so
If you're in Aki's shoes, your opponent showed some strength. He's a no limit player. Maybe he has a set and overplays it. So you want to keep betting, and you want to keep building the pot
times.
against the set
And for what he
specifically.
did for poker,
If your
like,
opponent happened to have Jack 10, I mean that's great too. You have hearts, right? So you always want to bet. You don't want your opponent to check back kings or queens.
Yeah, absolutely, the moneymaker effect.
How big you want to bet?
So-
Well, I mean, your opponent has 22% equity, and you don't want to lay too good of a price, right? So you probably want to pot
yeah,
where they
with,
need 33. So they're going to make a substantial mistake if they would see your hand, right? So you want to bet pot.
They both have the nuts for now, and Aki B has a redraw, but Prodigy is probably shoving it in now.
Okay, I like the sizing, 1800. I mean, he should have potted. Maybe this is pot, given maybe there's rake or something. Prodigy never wants to raise. His opponent is saying, hey, I got Jack 10. And he probably does have Jack 10 in live PLO. Like, that's how it works. So there's no benefit in raising at all because your opponent has the same hand, maybe a redraw, which is what happens here. You want to call. You want to pretend, hey, I got queens or kings. I'm chasing. And then you're hoping the river pair so you can bluff.
Yeah. Aki potted it. Maybe Prodigy just
I would
called.
guess that Prodigy might rip,
Aki has it very
but
often.
I don't know how big his
Then
brain
tries
is.
to
It must be
play
pretty
on the
big,
river.
so he might just call.
Yeah, he's only calling.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course,
Thought
he's the
it
best.
could have been, but
Great
Flo
call.
still has the-
This
has
is,
the nuts by the
as a
time we have
PLO
to
player
play
or
pot.
pro, this is the standard play. Everything is great so far. Let's
get
see what
going.
happens here.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
not a
amazing.
plan.
Okay, so this is the card.
It might
Aki
still
is going to check.
happen. It might
Prodigy
still happen,
is
but
going to
that's
bet.
actually what Prodigy called for. You know, he
Yeah,
anticipates
commentary is spot on as
Aki
well.
to be on the same hand, so with the nuts. So Prodigy only calls, to then make a move on the river.
By the way, I see people checking back here in this instance, which is obviously complete nonsense. This is the dream. You're supposed to win half. You have a chance to
and
win
get
all of it.
Aki off the same hand. That is the plan of calling.
Can you
And
be
as well,
beat?
it's
And in
also
theory,
possible
yes.
as,
But we're playing poker, trying to win some pots.
Prodigy doesn't.
So now you want to ask yourself, how big do I want to bet to make that hand fold? I would say you want to bet big. You don't want to leave any doubt in your opponent's mind that Jack 10 might be
have
good.
a redraw, which means like no hearts.
Beautiful
Now
stuff.
he
He goes
doesn't.
for
Yes,
pot.
Exactly. That's
I
a
mean,
good
this
play
is
by
just
Prodigy.
really, really
Now he
well
puts into
played.
the tests and pots it. And, they have the
And
same hand.
you can never
And
call
for
this in
Aki,
Aki's
it will
shoes,
be
by the
really
way.
hard now.
I mean, where are the bluffs? You have the hearts.
It might be a fold.
Your
So
opponent
great-
called a
great
pot
play
test
by-
bet.
by
He called a
Prodigy,
raise on the flop, a
I have
pot
to
test
say.
bet on the turn. You just
Like
there's like in
anticipating
no
a
world
rate.
you can make a profitable
Aki
call. Like even in this
usually
instance, he's
will
just
have it.
chopping, calling a pot
So-
size bet, right?
Yeah, just calling. And then
If you can
trying
only
to move
chop
off on
or
the river.
worse, you need to be right 66% of the time, which is just not going to work out here.
Yeah.
Because
I
it's
like that
basically
one.
an overbet, but I mean that goes into too
It might work. Would be interesting.
much number crunching. Okay, so he's
Yeah,
gonna
he lets it go.
fold.
Yep, well done, Prodigy.
Nice. Oh, look.
Prodigy
Yeah.
shows proudly
Shows that
the.
it's
Okay, so a couple of aura points lost, but
Yep.
So
it's okay.
going back to.
You just want to muck the
players, yeah, if we
hand,
go
but this
down
is a friendly game. I understand.
the route.
Okay, so this is supposed to be the number one hand. Let's
And
see.
That brings PLO
Interesting.
PE
Who's in the mix? Let me just look at this pre. So we have Varun. Don't know who that is. Raising. A7-5 deuce. Ambitious. Then we have the button Bobby calling with King Jack 9-4. Could be even more ambitious. That's how we know Bobby. And then Queen Jack 8-3. Listen, I mean, people have some interesting
Decent
hands here.
hand
Let's leave it at that.
Called as well. Yeah, okay.
Is there
It's-
any hand here that
it's
makes
because he's
sense?
on the dealer button and because he gets
I mean, ace nine nine
decent
deuce, I
odds.
can see that. You can make
And
the
Players
nuts.
behind them are not free betting so much, so he can get.
Is
away
this a
with it.
bomb pot or what's going on?
But-
I guess not. Okay, so interesting stuff going on here. So, set for Pinky, he's first to act. Eunice has top pair, nothing to work with. Nothing to work with top pair in the gutter. So nut flush draw and a gutter to the bottom, and then Bobby has top two and the king eye flush draw, and is somehow less than 1% to win. Welcome to multi-way PLO. That's how you get punished playing the wrong hands pre, I suppose.
Technically,
How are we playing this? So in Pinky's shoes, this is not a spot you want to lead. And the reason is because I don't think you get enough clarity if your hand is good when you get raised. So you bet this hand, say, on this particular board, you bet ace nine nine deuce, you get pumped on the flop, you get raised, deep SBR, right? You have to fold. You just have to fold because you're too much behind against jacks, you're dead, one out. And you're not enough ahead against the combo draws of king, queen, 10 with diamonds or something along those lines, right? So if someone is overplaying a hand like that, not necessarily overplaying, but if someone is playing aggressively with a hand like king, queen, 10 of diamonds, you don't have enough of an edge. I mean, if you have any edge at all, maybe you're flipping something along those lines to justify getting the money in. So basically this hand, you just want to check. Well, let's see how this develops. Check is good.
It's not
check.
a
So far, I
great
like it. Do we want to see a bet by
hand
Varun?
that he has there.
I don't think
especially
Varun wants to
multi-way,
bet, by the way.
because it doesn't have a lot of.
This is
component.
Varun. Okay, he goes for 500. Well, if you're in a five-way pot, you need to be prepared to get the money in. So there is how much is in the middle before you bet? 760,
technically-
and he has 10K behind, and some people cover. Do you want to get 10K in? Is what you want to ask yourself. Like the dream of thinking, hey, I'm going to bet Jack 9-6, and everyone is going to fold. Amazing, great semi bluff. This is a dream for a reason. It's not going to happen on Jack 9-6 five ways. What will happen is you will either get called or you will get pumped. And given that you don't block top set or top two, you're likely to get pumped on the flop. So you want to get stacks in. The answer is no, because you're going to be a dog with this hand. I mean, if you can get it in five ways on the flop, whatever, but you don't want to reopen the pot here, honestly, with this hand. You need to be a bit stronger. You need to have a better straight draw. Pretty much that's what you need. You need to have a better straight draw to bet this hand. And then Bobby thinking behind now, I want to get this hand heads up. I have top two king eye flush draw. I don't need any more players in the pot. I just want to get it in heads up. And I think raising here is what he needs to do. And just put in the 8,000 pounds. So,
especially multi-way.
there's no benefit in
Because it doesn't
calling.
have a lot of
Let's see what he
components
does.
that
He
make the
is,
nuts.
he's going to call.
And now
So why is Bobby calling? I think he's probably thinking, I want to see how this develops. Don't want to run into top set, I suppose. But you made your bet, when you come in with this hand pre, you got to prepare to die, I guess, with top two and the king eye flush draw. That's because the downside of calling is, I think, just too large. Also, funny enough, imagine Maroon bets, right? 500. Bobby now pots. Pinky's going to fold. Guaranteed. Like you can't, against a bet five ways and a pot size raise on this board, your ace 9-9 deuce hand is dead, is in the muck, right? So basically, Bobby, by raising on the flop, he would have been able to either get everyone to fold or Varun to call and be ahead. But now I think what happens is going to be that Pinky will continue, and I think Pinky cannot raise. He might raise, but he's so here's the thing. When you look at his hand, it's very easy in the heat of the moment to think about the best case scenario, which is, hey, I'm going to raise, everyone's going to fold, or I'm going to raise, get it in against one guy who has top two, or one guy who has a flush draw, and things are great, or okay. But you don't think about the worst case scenario, which is, what if you get three ways all in? You're cooked with this hand, right? What if your opponent just has jacks? You get it in heads up, you're cooked. There are many scenarios here that are very realistic given the action where you are completely cooked. I don't think you can fold, although it's not a huge crime, to be honest, because you have no redraw. But I think calling is really the only option here.
Like less than 1% chance of
We don't know what reads he has on
because
Varun and
Varun has
Bobby,
the
but
nut flush draw,
I think at this
and then
SPR,
PLO
getting in
Pinky
nines here
has
is
the
just
set.
no good
And,
times.
well,
Even though in this
two
instance he's
other
crushing.
jacks are out
Okay,
there
he's
as
like,
well.
let me
That's
just put in
unlucky.
a
So
few
essentially he's
stacks.
drawing that. I don't know. Is there any chance he could win the
It's
hand?
it's
Please?
easy to look at this and think, yeah, great, raising nines, you know. But then in another scenario, you're gonna run to jacks and ask yourself, why is he raising nines? It makes no sense. So I think, objectively
Must be
speaking, I
something
just think it's
phenomenal.
too light.
But
It's too optimistic,
yes,
you know, like
it's
focused on
tough
the best case
because,
outcome, and
could be
kind of
incentivized
ignoring
to
like,
get,
yeah, but what
all
if
of
it
money,
doesn't?
essentially.
You know, if I run into any of the good
Okay,
stuff,
there it goes.
which he should,
Yeah, so
honestly, in a
PLO
five-way
Pinky
pot.
applies pressure,
So
raises it up.
lot to learn here. You know, I think that Varun should have checked and Bobby should have raised and Pinky should have called.
Varun with the nut
But
flush
hey,
draw.
these are all, I
And-
mean, not all, but some of them are professional players. I'm sure they have their own opinions, you know, about the hands. This is my
Short to
viewpoint.
the low end of the
Now,
street.
Varun has to fold the not flush draw in a gutter, which is, you know, a disgusting outcome. And it kind of confirms why you don't want to bet. And then back to Bobby.
Go. All right.
I mean, what are you going to do? As I said before, you made your bed.
So in a way, it's like deciding if
You don't block the nut flush draw. Your hope is your opponent has Jack 9, Queen 10, that kind of stuff. Your hope is your opponent has the nut flush draw with a straight draw. And you just run it. You just can't get away from this thing. You just got to put it in and see what happens. And in this case, he is not doing that hot. But as I said,
kind of even give up on
he made his bet when he
it.
entered the
So
pot
it's
pre.
tricky. Good thing for
Now
him
you
is
gotta
now
go with
put
it.
in,
So
yeah.
he's putting it in.
Gonna see the bad news and yeah, like how big is the pot? We just missed 20 grand pot. You know,
How is it possible that the
but
best
very
hand we saw
close. We're
played
at
was
18
actually by
grand.
Prodigy, who's not even a PLO player?
We'll
I
see
think,
how it plays
I
out.
guess it confirms like
So
how
he's very
valuable it
tricky.
is to understand
For
poker
sure.
theory and how
But,
applicable it
yeah,
is into
it's
other
only
games.
70-30, so yeah, Bobby's far.
Bobby
from
not
best.
happy, obviously, but who knows? I mean, some of the diamonds are gone as well.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we see
He needs a jack, he needs a
runouts
diamond.
for the biggest
Boom.
pot of the night.
Pretty good
Well, it's
start.
great delivery. So we got the flush
He's
with
happy,
Bobby. Will
and
it
he
go up?
remained. Oh my God, how many
Oh.
diamonds are in that deck?
So
Varun thinking, what the
two
hell?
diamonds up
What was
on,
I
so
doing?
it's quite likely that
Bobby
yeah, on the
tilted, he
second
cannot
runout,
scoop, or he thinks he can't.
we see PLO Pinky
Yeah,
win.
okay, they're gonna chop this
And
thing up.
That's the case.
Interesting
So
hand
we
nonetheless. I
had
think there were a lot of spots to learn. Hey, if you guys enjoyed this video and you learned a thing or two, then make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more about PLO. With that, we're going to wrap things up. Check out PLOmastermind.com if you want to learn more from myself and other established mid and high stakes PLO professionals. I'll see you guys on another day. This has been JNandez. Over and out. Take care.